In this lecture, we'll have a conversation about how collisions and triggers are properly handled inside Unity and get our ship colliding with other game objects in our scene. At the moment, I don't think our player ship has any sort of collider on it yet. Let's attach something so we've got something to work with. I'm going to collapse a few of these components in our inspector just to clean things up a little bit. And directly on our player ship game object, let's add a box collider. Let's just make sure that this is roughly the size of our ship. So let's just start it out at something like 10, 10, 10. The pivot is way down here at the bottom of our ship, so we just need to slide that up a bit. And I'm just going to get this roughly in place so we have a single box collider that is roughly the size of the ship. I'm going to be pretty forgiving from a game design perspective. I don't want it to actually go all the way out to where these tails are on the top and the bottom of the ship. I think about there is good. I'm also going to toggle on is trigger on this box collider directly on our player ship. We don't want it bouncing around or flying throughout our scene at all. To make sure that we're getting collision events on this player ship, however, what else do we need? Have a quick think. A rigid body. Let's also just uncheck use gravity on our rigid body component. At the moment, the only other really thing in our scene is this enemy spaceship. It's going to be a little bit hard to navigate at the moment. We'll add colliders to it shortly. For now, let's just add a test ship kind of right at the very beginning of our scene, just so we don't have to wait 7 or 8 seconds before our spaceship gets to the enemy spaceship every time for testing. At the moment, the only other thing in our scene that has collision is our terrain. On each individual terrain game object, you can see it comes with this terrain collider, which will just provide contact with the terrain, basically where the mesh of our terrain is. So where were we? Let's get that test spaceship, imported assets, GDTV assets, sci-fi spaceships, models, and then just drag this big red chunky boy right in here and then just scale it way up so we don't have a problem hitting it with our spaceship. With that rotated slightly, just so we can easily hit it, let's also just add a box collider component to this test enemy. And yeah, that's about right. It's already got a box-looking shape as a spaceship, so let's just modify that ever so slightly on our box collider. I'm going to shrink my size down on the Y and make sure we're good in that direction, and yeah, I think we're about set. I'm just going to kind of put it right around here just so we can test it and fly into it. We don't need to add any other sort of logic to our spaceship yet. I just need something to run into. Now here's a quiz question for you. Does our test enemy need a rigid body component attached to it to properly fire collision events with our player ship that does have a rigid body? And drum roll, please. No. The answer is no. But we've got this handy dandy cheat sheet that we can use to have a brief conversation about it. Because our player ship has both a rigid body and a trigger collider, it can pretty much interact with everything else in our scene. Now, if we just had a static collider and no rigid body, it could not interact with other static colliders that also do not have rigid bodies attached to it. Generally speaking, a good rule of thumb, if one thing has a rigid body and the other does not, you can typically get some collision events handled properly with it. That cheat sheet we've put together is a nice one to use, but it's basically just a combination of these two collision matrices here found directly on the Unity docs. I'll make sure to leave a link to this page in the resources tab below. So let's do a little bit of testing with a new custom C# script. In our scripts folder, let's right-click, create a new mono behavior script, and we'll just call this collision handler. With our collision handler class created, let's go ahead and on our player ship, just attach that. I'm just going to attach it near our other scripts as a component. And let's open that up in VS Code. With this class created, I'd like to introduce you to this lecture's challenge. Using onTriggerEnter, print to our console what our player ship is colliding with using debug.log. And a bit of a hint in case you haven't seen it before, you can use gameObject.name to get the name of something in your hierarchy. Pause the video, give it an honest effort, and I'll see you back here in a few moments and we'll go through my solution together. Rightio, back in my collision handler, let's go ahead and create an onTriggerEnter. All we need to do is debug.log other.gameObject.name. Now, I believe you could actually do other.name directly, and it will also print that to the hierarchy. Let's just go ahead and try that in just a moment. And to get just an extra bit of fanciness on my end, I'm just going to actually concatenate this together with hit as a string plus what's referred to as concatenating other.name. And then I'm actually just going to put some extra white space in between hit and my closing apostrophe on my string reference, just to make sure when we're concatenating, we actually have a space in between hit and other name. Before we head back into Unity, this would work just fine. Another way to do it with the exact same result but not using string concatenation is with what's referred to in C# as string interpolation. To see what that looks like, you can type debug.log, and then at the very beginning, before we start typing in our string references, you can pass in the $sign, then start the quotation marks, type in hit space, and then inside curly braces, you can actually start to then type code again. So you could actually type other.gameObject.name. End curly brace, apostrophe, parentheses, semicolon, and you'll actually get the same result. We can actually just put both side by side just to see that in our console, but either is just fine. I'll make sure to leave a link to some documentation if you'd like to look a little bit more into string interpolation, and we'll make sure we use both throughout the rest of this section. Let's head back into Unity to see what this looks like. With my console open, I'll go ahead and hit play, and as soon as we fly through the spaceship, we should have a good collision event, hit test enemy, printed twice just because we have two debug.logs. Let's see if we can also hit the terrain. Awesome. It looks like my collision on my player ship is being handled correctly. Before we move on, let's just go ahead and clean up one of these. We don't need both of these. I'll just comment out the top one for now and leave the string interpolation one down below. All right, that's all I wanted to handle for now in this lecture. When you're ready to move on, I'll see you in the next one.